Rush hour chaos had settled into a tense stillness outside Lincoln Elementary in downtown Chicago. Parents hurriedly pulled cars into the narrow drop-off lanes, impatient honks echoing against brick walls, while children clutched backpacks too large for their small frames. The morning sun glinted off the wet asphalt from an earlier drizzle, casting long reflections that rippled like water. Amid this typical school day scene, a singular disruption froze everyone in place. A police dog, a German shepherd named Titan, sat in the middle of the sidewalk, immovable, ears perked, eyes locked on a single point across the street. Officer Mark Reyes tugged the leash, his knuckles whitening. "Titan, move, heel," he ordered, voice firm but calm. The dog's eyes didn't waver. The leash didn't budge. Titan was 6 years old, a veteran K9 with years of service in narcotics and search and rescue. He had never disobeyed a command, never faltered under pressure, never made a mistake. Until now. Parents stopped their cars, shielding their children instinctively, unsure whether to step forward or run. Phones emerged from pockets and backpacks, cameras raised, recording the unthinkable. Children whispered to each other, wide-eyed. Teachers peered from classroom windows, jaws tight. Some officers exchanged worried looks. And then the crowd noticed something that no one could explain. Titan wasn't staring at a threat. He wasn't barking at a stranger. His gaze was fixed on a little girl standing alone by the curb, clutching a pink backpack that sagged like it carried the weight of the world. Her hair was tied in a messy ponytail, strands falling into her solemn face. She didn't cry. She didn't wave her arms. She just stared back at Titan, a mixture of fear and familiarity reflected in her wide, brown eyes. Reyes took a step closer, trying to coax Titan. "Come on, boy, let's go, heel." His voice was firm, practiced. Titan's ears twitched, but he didn't move. He lowered his head slightly, nudging the leash toward the girl as if signaling that he wouldn't leave until she did. Why won't he move?" a parent whispered to another, voice trembling. No one had an answer. Emily Carter, the little girl, shifted her weight nervously. Her tiny fingers fidgeted with the strap of her backpack. She had only been at this school for a week, having recently moved with her foster mother after her previous placement fell through. She didn't know anyone here, not friends, not teachers, not even the school principal. And yet, she felt a strange, unexplainable calm at the sight of Titan. It was as though she recognized him, though she couldn't place from where. The police officers tried to act quickly. They formed a semicircle around Titan and the girl, instructing bystanders to step back. A few attempted to coax Titan with treats or soft voices, but he ignored them. He was hyper-focused, alert, and tense. Even other police dogs would have responded by retreating or obeying their handler, but Titan did not. He was guarding. Reyes bent slightly, bringing his face closer to Titan. "Buddy, please, we need to move." Titan's ears twitched again. Then slowly, deliberately, he shifted his gaze to Emily. His growl was low, warning, but controlled, not aggression, not anger, but unmistakable protection. Emily's lips trembled. She had seen dogs before, sure, but never like this. Titan wasn't just looking at her. He was watching over her, waiting, assessing. Every muscle in his body was coiled like a spring. And yet there was trust in his eyes, a message she didn't yet understand. Then, in the silence broken only by distant sirens and murmurs of the gathering crowd, Emily took a cautious step forward. Titan's tail wagged, almost imperceptibly. She froze, unsure if she should continue, and Titan let out a soft bark, almost a nudge. Her breath hitched as she slowly lowered her hand, and Titan leaned toward her, resting his massive head near her feet. The crowd gasped, cameras zoomed in, phones recorded every second. A teacher's hand flew to her mouth. Parents whispered frantic questions. Who is she? How does he know her? Reyes felt a chill run down his spine. Titan had been trained to detect danger, track missing persons, and follow commands with absolute loyalty. Yet here he was, ignoring orders, ignoring protocol, fixated on a single child who seemed utterly unaware of the attention she had drawn. Is he supposed to do that? A fellow officer asked, uncertainty in his voice. Ray's shook his head, voice tight. Never, not like this, something different. The girl, Emily, finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. He saved me before. The words hung in the air. A dozen adults froze mid-breath, hearts skipping. Some stepped closer, trying to hear, others instinctively stepped back, unsure if they were witnessing a miracle or a crisis. Titan's body stiffened even more. He nudged Emily gently, then sat immovable again. Ray's knelt beside him, trying to mask his rising panic. He had to know what was going on. He had trained with Titan for years. He knew his dog's behavior like he knew his own reflection. This was unprecedented. Then it hit him, a memory he had buried, one he hadn't thought about in years, a fire, a late-night call, a child trapped inside a burning apartment. Titan had pulled a child from the flames, a tiny, trembling girl whose wrist had been scarred by the smoke and heat. That child had vanished into the foster system shortly afterward. No name, no family contact, no closure. Ray's voice caught. Titan, no way could it be. Emily shifted slightly and Titan's eyes softened. He leaned against her, protective but calm, as if he recognized her instantly. The entire street seemed to hold its breath. Sirens in the distance grew louder. Parents muttered, whispering the story to each other, disbelief etched into their faces. Somewhere across the street, a news van screeched to a halt. Cameramen scrambled to capture the scene. Lives were being recorded, framed, immortalized in pixels, but the real story was playing out quietly between a little girl and a dog whose loyalty refused to waver. Emily looked up at the crowd, eyes wide and trembling. He remembers me. A collective gasp echoed through the street. Whispers of miracle and hero floated among the onlookers, but no one fully understood the depth of what they were witnessing. Titan wasn't just following instinct. He was waiting for something or someone. Ray's took a deep breath, unsure whether to celebrate or panic. Protocol demanded that Titan obey, that the crowd disperse, that chaos be contained. But Titan refused. He would not move. Not until Emily took his leash and led him herself. The tension was electric. Phones captured the scene, social media notifications lit up. A child, a police dog, a city frozen in the impossible. Everyone watched as Titan, a trained officer of the law, sat waiting for the one person who seemed to hold the key to his obedience. And in that frozen moment, the world seemed to tilt slightly off its axis, holding onto one simple, unexplainable fact. Titan would not leave. Not for anyone, not for any command, not for the bustling city around him. Only her. Emily reached out her small hand, trembling, toward Titan's massive head. He lowered it further, nudging her palm with the weight of years, of memories, of unspoken promises. The crowd went silent. And then, just as Emily's fingers brushed his fur, Titan's tail gave the tiniest wag, a signal that something extraordinary was about to unfold. No one yet knew the story behind this reunion. But the city was about to learn a truth that would shock everyone, forever changing the way they saw courage, loyalty, and the bond between a child and a dog trained to save lives. Titan wouldn't move. Emily had to lead, and when she did, the world would watch history in motion. The question hung in the air. Why did this dog refuse to leave? And what had happened between him and the little girl to create a bond that even a police protocol couldn't break? The answer would shatter expectations, and the city would never forget what happened next. Emily Carter's small fingers trembled as they wrapped around Titan's thick leash. The weight of the dog was intimidating, even to a seasoned police officer like Mark Ray's, but Emily held it with a determination that startled everyone. She had never led a police dog before, not a trained K9 of Titan's caliber, but she walked with surprising confidence. Each step she took seemed to ripple through the crowd, as if the city itself was holding its breath, watching this unlikely reunion unfold. Titan moved beside her with a careful precision, his paws barely making a sound on the wet asphalt. He stayed alert, scanning the crowd and the surroundings, but his gaze frequently flicked to Emily, as if she were the only thing in the world that mattered. Officers whispered to each other, astonished. They had trained with Titan, relied on him in life-or-death situations, but never had they seen him act like this, not for a stranger. Emily's eyes darted nervously to the faces in the crowd. Parents, teachers, officers, and bystanders all were staring. Phones were raised, recording, live-streaming, and sharing. The world was watching. She felt exposed, yet strangely safe with Titan at her side. She had felt alone so many times in her life, shuffled between foster homes, classrooms, and neighborhoods that never seemed to care. But now, with Titan beside her, the weight of those years seemed to lift slightly. Is he supposed to be like this? One teacher whispered to another, voice trembling. He's a police dog. He doesn't just. Her words faltered as she shook her head. Emily's lips quivered. He saved me once, she said softly, barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. The words hit Ray's like a jolt of electricity. His heart raced, memories flooding back with the force of a tidal wave. He remembered a late-night call 2 years ago, a domestic emergency that had escalated into flames. A child trapped inside an apartment, smoke choking the hallways, fire spreading faster than the fire department could arrive. Titan had pulled the child from the apartment, ears flat, teeth bared against debris, ignoring his own safety. The child had survived, but her family vanished afterward, relocated through the foster system. The case had gone cold. No name, no address, no follow-up. And now here she was, Emily Carter, alive, standing a few feet from him, her small frame dwarfed by Titan's massive body, yet somehow emanating a quiet authority over him. Ray's throat tightened. Could it really be her? Could this be the same little girl Titan had risked everything to save? The crowd seemed to sense the tension. A news reporter whispered into a microphone, barely hiding her awe. Cameras swiveled, capturing every moment. Parents in the back held their children close, their own eyes wide with disbelief. Some whispered prayers under their breaths. Others exchanged stunned glances, murmuring about miracles and destiny. Emily took another step forward and Titan followed, packing his massive body beside her. His ears twitched constantly, alert to every movement, every sound. A cyclist rang his bell a few feet away, startling some of the younger children, but Titan didn't flinch. He didn't need to. Emily's presence had calmed him in a way that no command, no training, no years of discipline ever had. Ray's approached cautiously, trying to mask the lump forming in his throat. He knew Titan. He knew what he was capable of. And he also knew this. Whatever bond existed between Titan and Emily was beyond explanation, beyond training, beyond the rules of protocol. "Emily, how do you know him?" Ray's asked softly, careful not to alarm her. Emily hesitated, biting her lower lip. She had never spoken about that night, not to anyone. She had buried it deep, the trauma, the fear, the memory of smoke and fire, of heat and pain. And yet now, in the middle of a crowded street, she felt compelled to tell a small part of it. He saved me," she said again, louder this time. "From the fire. The night everything went wrong." The words were barely comprehensible to most of the onlookers, but Titan responded immediately. He leaned into her, resting his massive head against her shoulder for a fraction of a second before straightening, alert and tense once more. The subtle movement spoke volumes. This was his mission, his purpose, his duty, and it had never ended. Ray's mind raced. The old fire case, the missing family, the child who had disappeared, and now Emily standing here as if by fate. His instincts screamed that something bigger was happening, something dangerous. Yet the girl remained calm, almost unnervingly composed for her age. She was quiet, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the crowd, aware of everyone around her and always returning to Titan. A sudden movement across the street drew Ray's attention. An unmarked car slowed, idling suspiciously. The driver's face was partially obscured by a hood, but Ray's noticed the hands on the steering wheel, tattooed, nervous, deliberate. Titan stiffened, ears rising, body tensing. Emily instinctively moved closer to him, her small hands gripping his leash like a lifeline. Reyes whispered more to himself than anyone else, stay close, Emily." But the girl seemed to understand instinctively. She didn't falter. She didn't cry. She just stood, holding Titan's leash, eyes locked on the approaching threat. The crowd had no idea what was unfolding. They saw only a little girl and a police dog, unaware that the history between them was a story of survival, loss, and a bond forged in smoke and danger. But Titan knew. He always knew. And now, after 2 long years, the universe had somehow reunited them in the most public and dramatic way possible. Emily took a step forward, pulling slightly on the leash, guiding Titan down the sidewalk. The dog followed, controlled but tense, every muscle primed for action. Phones captured the moment, live streams went viral instantly. Hashtags began trending. Police dog hero, Titan and Emily, miracle in Chicago. Parents whispered, "Is she safe? How did this happen?" Then Emily stopped abruptly, a few feet away from the unmarked car. Titan mirrored her halt, lowering his massive body to the ground in a stance that radiated readiness. The driver's head turned slightly, scanning the crowd. Titan growled, a deep, controlled rumble that vibrated through the street. Emily's hands shook on the leash, but she didn't let go. Her voice was barely audible, trembling but steady. "Don't come near." The driver flinched, then shifted, clearly recognizing the dog, or perhaps the girl. The tension in the air became suffocating. Parents covered their children's eyes, teachers whispered frantically into phones, officers instinctively reached for backup. And then Emily's words broke the fragile silence. "He saved me once, and he'll do it again." The crowd froze, phones hovered. The world held its breath. Titan's eyes locked on the figure in the car, muscles coiled like a spring. Every instinct told him danger was imminent, yet his loyalty was unshakable. He would not leave Emily's side. Not now, not ever. Mark Reyes felt a chill creep up his spine. He had faced armed criminals, explosive situations, life-and-death rescues. But nothing in his career had prepared him for this moment. A little girl leading a battle-hardened police dog, standing against a looming, unseen threat. And just as Emily tightened her grip on Titan's leash, the car door began to open slowly. The crowd gasped, phones shook in trembling hands, and a city held its breath, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. The question on everyone's mind: who was in that car and what did they want with Emily? The car door creaked open, a slow, deliberate sound that made every officer's heartbeat accelerate. Emily tightened her grip on Titan's leash instinctively, though she had no idea why fear pooled in her stomach. Titan's growl deepened, vibrating against her hand, a protective force stronger than any words could convey. His body was a living shield, tense, ready to spring into action, yet strangely calm in the knowledge that Emily was beside him. Mark Reyes took a cautious step forward, hand hovering near his sidearm. He had faced countless dangerous encounters, seen criminals surrender and resist, but nothing in his 6 years as a K-9 handler compared to this surreal moment. His trained instincts screamed, threat, danger, protective action required. But it wasn't the adrenaline that struck him, it was memory. A face appeared from the car, partially obscured by the hood and shadows. Reyes froze. It wasn't just a stranger. There was something terrifyingly familiar in the way the person's eyes narrowed, scanning the scene, calculating. He leaned slightly toward the driver's seat, tattoos marking his forearm, faint but unmistakable. Reyes' mind raced, piecing together fragments of the past he had long tried to forget. 2 years ago, late at night, Titan and he had responded to a domestic fire call in a dilapidated apartment complex on the city's north side. The fire had spread fast, the flames licking through the thin walls with terrifying speed. A child had been trapped inside. Titan had charged into the blaze without hesitation, smoke stinging his eyes, flames threatening his fur. He had emerged with the girl in his jaws, coated in soot and ash, her tiny body trembling in fear. That child had survived, but her mother had perished. Her father, suspected of neglect or worse, had vanished before authorities could act. The child was relocated into foster care, and the case had grown cold. Ray's stomach churned as the realization hit him like a punch. Could it be Emily? Could this little girl, holding Titan's leash, the same girl who now stood fearless in the middle of a crowded street, be the very child Titan had saved from that fire? Titan nudged Emily gently, signaling her to move, but she remained frozen, eyes locked on the man emerging from the car. Her voice quivered as she whispered, I think he found me." The words carried weight far beyond her years. Officers stiffened, some reaching for backup radios, others instinctively forming a protective perimeter. The man stepped fully into view now, tall, gaunt, with a look of barely restrained fury. His eyes were sharp, scanning the crowd, the cameras, Titan, and finally resting on Emily. Recognition flashed in his gaze, but it wasn't relief. It was possession. Titan growled again, low and guttural, vibrating through the air like a warning shot. Emily's hands tightened on the leash, fingers whitening. She didn't need to tell Titan to protect her, he already knew. His nose twitched, ears tilted, body coiled like a spring. Every instinct, every ounce of his police training, all of it now centered on one mission: keep this girl safe. Reyes approached cautiously, speaking low. "Emily, do you know him?" Emily's eyes, wide and glassy, met his. He's my dad," she whispered. The words were almost swallowed by the morning air, but the weight was immense. This wasn't just a stranger. This was the man linked to the night of the fire, the man who had disappeared and left her vulnerable for years. The very father she had feared, whose presence she had tried to forget. Ray's heart pounded. He had seen fathers fail, abandon, even harm, but he had never seen a child face one so directly while standing in the open, in the middle of a crowd, with a police dog at her side as protector. Titan's growl grew louder, more urgent. He inched closer to Emily, his massive frame now a living barrier between her and the man. He sniffed the air, nostrils flaring, eyes locked on the potential threat. Emily's grip on the leash was steady, but her small shoulders trembled. Memories of smoke, heat, and the night of terror flooded back, sharp and vivid. The man's gaze softened momentarily as he looked at Emily. Perhaps he had hoped for a reunion, an opportunity to reclaim control, but Titan's presence shattered that illusion. The dog's loyalty was absolute. His bond with Emily was unbreakable. Any notion of intimidation or manipulation evaporated the moment Titan positioned himself between father and child. Rayes whispered to Emily, keeping his voice low, calm. "Titan's got your back. Stay calm. Don't let him see you afraid." Emily nodded, her lips pressed together, eyes never leaving the man who had once been part of her life, now a potential threat again. The crowd had become a silent audience to a reunion they didn't understand. Phones captured every second. People murmured anxiously. Teachers clutched children to their chests. News crews adjusted cameras, anticipating the unfolding drama. The city, it seemed, had stopped to witness this surreal, almost cinematic moment. A little girl confronting her past while a police dog stood sentinel, loyal to a fault. The man took a cautious step forward. Titan stiffened, growling with authority that stopped the movement in its tracks. Emily held her ground, her small hands gripping the leash, her voice barely audible. "Don't come closer." Time seemed to stretch. Every second waited with tension. Officers fanned out, radios crackling quietly as backup was called. Yet in the center of the street, all eyes remained on the little girl and the dog who refused to leave her side. Emily's mind raced. She remembered the night of the fire, the heat, the screaming, the suffocating smoke. Titan's presence had been the only constant, the single force of safety amid chaos. She remembered his eyes, the way he had nudged her, guided her, protected her. And now, years later, he was here again, older but just as vigilant, just as determined. The man's face twisted with a mixture of anger and disbelief. He had spent months tracking Emily, attempting to exert control through shadows and distance. And now, confronted with the reality of Titan, a dog who had saved her life once and now refused to yield to any threat, He realized the balance of power had shifted. Titan stepped closer to Emily, his massive body a wall, his growl deepening, resonant with warning. Emily's heart pounded, but she felt a strange calm in his presence. She whispered softly to him, fingers stroking his fur. "It's okay, Titan, just like before." Titan's ears flicked, tail stiff, but his eyes softened just enough to show understanding. He had never forgotten. He had waited, and now, reunited, he would not leave her side, no matter the cost. Reyes swallowed hard, realizing the full gravity of the situation. The man in the car was dangerous. He was desperate, but Titan was no ordinary dog. And Emily carried a quiet bravery that matched her protector's loyalty. Then, without warning, the man's phone buzzed and he stiffened. Titan growled again, sharper this time, alert to movement unseen. Emily instinctively pulled back slightly, reading Titan's reaction. Something was coming, something that could escalate the situation beyond what anyone in the street had imagined. The crowd held its collective breath. Cameras continued to roll. Phones captured every heartbeat of the moment. The city was witnessing a reunion that blurred the line between past trauma and present danger, between fear and courage, between the fragile and the fierce. And in that tense, suspended silence, Titan's growl became a prelude to action. Emily's small hands tightened on the leash, ready to face whatever came next, guided by the dog who had once saved her life, and was determined to do it again. The question now loomed larger than ever. Who else was out there, watching, waiting, and how far would they go to reach Emily? Emily's small hands tightened on Titan's leash, knuckles whitening as she took the first cautious step forward. Titan followed smoothly, his massive paws thudding softly on the wet asphalt, every movement precise, every muscle taut with readiness. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the little girl led the 6-year-old K9 down the sidewalk. A scene so improbable, so cinematic, it seemed ripped from the pages of a movie script. Phones lifted, live streams pinged, and the city's social media exploded with awe, disbelief, and hashtags trending in real time. Titan and Emily, hero dog, miracle in Chicago. Parents held their children closer, shielding their eyes from what they didn't understand. Teachers leaned against brick walls, whispering urgently into their phones, trying to calm students while their own hearts raced. Officers fanned out, maintaining a perimeter, glancing at the unmarked car still idling across the street, now a looming threat. Emily's pace was steady but cautious. She kept her eyes on Titan, trusting him to sense danger to guide her. And Titan did. His ears flicked at every unusual sound. His nose twitched as if reading the crowd, the vehicles, the sense of the city itself. But at the same time, he mirrored Emily's confidence, walking with an almost ceremonial calmness, every step a declaration that he would not leave her side. Reyes followed closely, heart pounding. He had faced criminals, explosives, high-speed chases, but nothing compared to this. This was a child, alone in the spotlight, facing a shadow from her past, guided by a dog whose loyalty defied logic. Every step Emily took felt like a defiance against fear itself. Halfway down the block, Emily's voice broke the tense silence. He's been looking for me," she whispered to Titan, barely audible over the hum of city traffic. Titan's ears twitched, and he nudged her gently with his massive head, as if acknowledging her words, as if confirming that he remembered the nights spent waiting outside the hospital, the nights searching for the child who had once been lost to smoke and fire. Across the street, the man in the unmarked car shifted impatiently. He was older now, thinner, his face lined with the stress of months spent tracking his daughter. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the crowd, but they kept returning to Titan and Emily. He recognized the bond. He understood now that no amount of intimidation, no threats could break what existed between them, yet he did not retreat. Instead, his fingers flexed against the steering wheel, tightening his grip, as though testing himself against the impossible. Emily stopped at the corner, looking up at the crosswalk signal. Titan sat obediently beside her, but his posture was rigid, alert. The dog sensed something more than the immediate threat. He had tracked danger before, sniffed out explosives, located missing persons, and defended officers in life-or-death situations. But this was personal. This was instinct and memory intertwined, the culmination of a bond forged in trauma, nurtured in absence, now reunited in a public stage. "Stay close," Reyes whispered, voice low but firm. Emily nodded, taking a deep breath. She stepped off the curb as the signal changed, and Titan followed, paws steady, body moving like a trained soldier, but with the grace of a guardian. The crowd began to murmur again, a mixture of fear, awe, and curiosity. Some cheered quietly, others gasped. Children mimicked Emily's cautious steps, feeling the weight of the drama unfold before their eyes. And above all, Titan's presence radiated calm authority, a silent declaration that nothing could harm the girl he had once saved and now would protect again. Halfway down the street, Emily suddenly stopped, tugging slightly on the leash. Titan halted beside her, ears pricked, eyes scanning the crowd and the shadows. She bent down, whispering softly into his fur, "I'm scared, what if he finds me again?" Titan's eyes met hers, almost human in their intensity. He nudged her hand, tail stiff but controlled, letting her know that he had remembered, that he had waited, and that he would never leave her side. The crowd watched, captivated, as a city's heart seemed to pause in awe at the unspoken conversation between child and dog. Across the street, the man in the unmarked car tensed visibly. Titan's vigilance was unshakable, every movement precise, every instinct activated. He growled low, a warning that vibrated through the concrete and asphalt. The man's eyes flicked around, calculating, searching for a way to assert control, but Titan's presence alone was a barrier he could not breach. Emily's small voice broke the tense silence again. "It's okay, Titan, just like before." The reassurance wasn't just for the dog, it was for herself. She drew on the memory of that fateful night, the warmth of Titan's body as he had guided her through smoke and flames. She had survived then, and she had survived again, thanks to him. Reyes watched, heart in his throat. He had handled Titan for years, trained him, trusted him, yet he had never seen him like this. Every muscle, every nerve in Titan's body screamed readiness. But Titan moved with deliberate calm, controlled by the bond with Emily, unshakable, loyal beyond reason. Suddenly, a figure emerged from a nearby alley, a man, unrecognized at first but familiar to Reyes. He carried a bag, walked briskly, head down, eyes scanning the street. Titan's growl deepened, his body shifting to block Emily from the perceived threat. Emily's grip on the leash tightened instinctively. The crowd gasped, pointing, phones recording. Chaos threatened to erupt in the city street, yet Titan's presence held it at bay, a living buffer between Emily and danger. Reyes whispered, "Stay behind me, Emily. Don't let go of Titan." She nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She had no idea who the man was or what he carried, but Titan did. That was enough. That had always been enough. The figure paused, looking up, and Titan's gaze locked on him. A low, warning growl vibrated from the dog's chest. Emily's small body stiffened, but she did not falter. She trusted Titan. He had saved her before, and he would do it again. The crowd watched in breathless anticipation, phones lifted, videos capturing every heartbeat. Then, as the man adjusted his bag and stepped forward, Titan lunged slightly, forcing him to stop in his tracks. Emily instinctively pulled back, keeping him in check, and the crowd gasped. Cameras zoomed, capturing the extraordinary scene. A little girl, a giant police dog, and a mysterious man frozen in a tense standoff. For a moment, the city seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. And then Emily whispered, trembling but resolute, "He'll never hurt me again. Not while you're here, Titan." Titan's ears flicked, his eyes softening just enough to convey understanding. He was ready to act, ready to defend, ready to reclaim the protection he had promised years ago. The crowd erupted in murmurs of awe and disbelief. Parents clutched children, officers adjusted positions, phones captured history. But in the shadows, the unmarked car remained, engine idling, headlights dim, observing. A city watched, captivated, but the real danger had only just begun. The question now hung over every heart on the street. Who else was watching Emily, and how far would they go to reach her? The man in the unmarked car had been watching for months. Every move Emily made, every foster placement, every school transfer, it was all meticulously tracked, calculated, and observed. He had thought he could reclaim control, thought he could quietly slip back into her life without consequence. But now, confronted with Titan, the dog who had once saved her from death, his plans unraveled like a fragile thread in the wind. Titan's growl deepened, low and resonant, vibrating through the asphalt. Emily instinctively pressed closer, letting the massive dog shield her small body. Officers fanned out, their radios crackling as backup was called, but Reyes knew that no reinforcements could replace what Titan offered: protection, instinct, and unwavering loyalty. Emily's mind raced, memories flashing in a torrent she had tried to bury. She remembered the fire, the heat searing her skin, the smoke clawing at her lungs, the terror of being trapped and alone. She remembered Titan's eyes, the forceful yet gentle guidance, the warm weight of his body against hers. She remembered thinking she would never survive. And yet here he was, older, larger, more imposing, and just as steadfast as the day he had rescued her. The man finally emerged from the car, stepping into the open street with a measured but menacing stride. His hands flexed at his sides. He wore the hardened look of someone who had spent years in desperation, tracking a child he believed he still controlled. His eyes scanned the crowd, resting on Emily, and for a fleeting moment they softened, not in remorse, but in recognition of something lost, something he had failed to reclaim. Titan's stance shifted subtly, muscles coiling, ears alert, tail rigid. He was ready. Not just trained to respond to commands, but driven by a bond forged in trauma, loyalty, and survival. Emily's small fingers gripped the leash, trembling but resolute. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "It's okay, Titan, I'm right here." Reyes stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Titan and the man. "Stay where you are," he commanded, voice steady but carrying authority. But the man ignored him, advancing another step. Titan growled, low and threatening, a warning that reverberated through the street. Emily instinctively tightened her hold on the leash, her body pressed close to Titan. The city seemed to hold its breath. Pedestrians stopped mid-step. Phones hovered, recording every second. News cameras zoomed in, capturing the drama in real time. For the people watching live, it was impossible to look away. But no one understood the full weight of the moment. The history, the trauma, the lives hanging in balance. Titan shifted forward, a calculated movement that signaled readiness without aggression. Emily followed, small steps echoing his own. She didn't lead him recklessly. She mirrored his instincts, trusting him to guide her through this dangerous encounter. The man froze, uncertainty flickering across his face for the first time. Titan's presence, his sheer size and intensity, made it clear. He would not allow Emily to be harmed. Then the man's voice cut through the tense air, low and strained. "Emily, you don't understand, you're mine." His tone was both pleading and threatening, a twisted mixture of obsession and desperation. Emily's lips trembled, but she stood tall, voice barely a whisper. "You don't get to decide that anymore." Titan growled in response, a deep warning that seemed to shake the very air. The man hesitated, realizing that his daughter was no longer a child to be coerced or intimidated. She had Titan, the dog who had saved her life, and she had the courage born of years of survival. Reyes noticed the subtle movements around the man, the tense flexing of fingers, the shifting weight, the attempt to gauge Titan's response. The man had underestimated the bond between the girl and the dog, a bond that transcended training, fear, and even instinct. Titan was more than a police dog in this moment. He was a living guardian, a sentinel who had waited years for this reunion and was determined to protect her at all costs. Suddenly, a police officer whispered urgently into his radio. "He's reaching for something, looks like a bag, possibly a weapon." Time slowed as every second became an eternity. Titan's growl deepened, low and commanding, a sound that froze the man mid-motion. Emily instinctively pulled back, guided by Titan's subtle cues, her small hands gripping the leash with unwavering determination. The man's eyes widened in panic. Titan's growl was no longer just a warning, it was a declaration. He would not move. He would not yield. He would protect Emily with everything he had, and the man's attempts to assert control were meaningless in the face of that loyalty. Ray stepped forward, ready to intervene, but he knew that Titan's instincts were far sharper than any human calculation. The dog had read the situation, assessed the danger, and acted with precision born from experience and connection. Every muscle in Titan's body signaled readiness. Every nerve was attuned to Emily's safety. Emily, despite her fear, whispered softly, "It's okay, Titan, just like before." Her voice was steady, though her heart pounded. She remembered the night of the fire, the terror, the darkness, the uncertainty, and she remembered Titan. The dog had been her guide, her protector, her lifeline, and now once again he was her shield against the man who had haunted her past. The man in the street froze completely. He had planned, calculated, and watched, but he had never accounted for this. A little girl standing resolute, a dog whose loyalty was unbreakable, and a handler who understood the history and gravity of the moment. He realized finally that he could not reach her, not while Titan was there, not while she trusted him, not while the bond they shared was stronger than any fear, any threat, any desperate attempt at control. And then, without warning, Titan's stance shifted. He moved forward slightly, nudging Emily to take a step back, positioning himself as a living barrier. The crowd gasped. Phones recorded. Cameras captured every tense detail. The city watched in stunned silence as the moment stretched to its breaking point, knowing that the next few seconds would determine the outcome of a confrontation that had been brewing for years. Emily whispered to Titan again, almost inaudibly, "We're okay, we're safe." But both of them knew it wasn't over. The man still stood there, anger and obsession battling with fear and realization. Titan's growl continued, low, commanding, a reminder that loyalty and courage could not be broken. Ray stepped closer, hand on his radio, ready to call for immediate backup. But he also knew that Titan's presence had shifted the balance completely. The man had no chance to act without risking exposure and arrest. The dog, trained to protect, instinctively knew the threat, and Emily's trust in him reinforced that bond. And just as the city held its breath, the man's shoulders slumped, a mixture of defeat and resignation crossing his face. He realized that the past could not be reclaimed, that the girl he once controlled had survived, and that the dog who had once saved her would never allow harm to come to her again. Titan's growl softened slightly, tail still rigid, eyes never leaving Emily. She let out a shaky breath, tightening her hold on his leash. For a brief moment, the street was silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the soft murmur of the crowd. Emily looked up at Titan, her eyes brimming with tears, and whispered, "Thank you for always finding me." The city had witnessed an extraordinary reunion, but the full story, the history, the trauma, the near death, the bond forged in fire and loyalty, was only beginning to unfold. The question lingered in every mind on the street. How had Titan known where to find her, and who else might be watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The man's shoulders slumped, but his eyes never left Emily. A lifetime of obsession, of missed opportunities and bitter resentment had brought him here. Every step, every decision, every vanished year of her childhood culminated in this tense standoff on a crowded city street. And yet, he had underestimated Titan. Titan's massive body shifted slightly, positioning himself between Emily and her father, as though saying, wordlessly, "You do not touch her." His growl resonated low and controlled, vibrating against the asphalt and through the bones of anyone standing near. The crowd murmured in awe and fear, sensing instinctively that this was no ordinary encounter. Emily stood her ground, small hands gripping the leash, chest heaving. She remembered everything, the fire, the chaos, the fear. But she also remembered Titan, the dog who had saved her once, who had waited, who had never forgotten. She drew in a deep, shaky breath and in the calm of the moment whispered, "It's okay, Titan. We're ready." The man's eyes flickered with frustration and something else, a fleeting recognition of defeat. He stepped back toward the car, fingers flexing at his sides, calculating, realizing the futility of his plan. But his pride, his obsession, would not let him surrender without a final attempt. Suddenly, a door across the street burst open. Child Protective Services officers and detectives who had been alerted earlier by Ray's radio call flooded the scene. Officers moved strategically, forming a barrier around Emily and Titan. Sirens blared in the distance, echoing off the brick walls and concrete of the urban landscape. The crowd recoiled, pressing against buildings and vehicles to make room for the authorities, creating a human buffer between the child, the dog, and the desperate man. Titan's growl deepened, a low rumble that carried an unmistakable warning, "Do not come closer." He positioned his massive body squarely between Emily and the man, ears alert, eyes blazing with focus and determination. Emily's hands tightened on the leash, trusting him completely. The man froze, his chest heaving. He knew, he finally understood, that his attempts to control or intimidate Emily had failed. The bond between the girl and the dog was unbreakable, forged in danger and reinforced over years of separation. Titan had waited, remembered, and now, in this public, dramatic moment, was ready to protect her from any threat. "Sir, step away from the child," Ray's commanded, stepping forward, voice firm, authoritative. "Now." The man's gaze flicked between Titan, Emily, and the approaching officers. His mouth opened, then closed. He swallowed hard, as though trying to summon words that would persuade, threaten, or manipulate, but no words came. Titan's unwavering stance left no room for negotiation. Emily, sensing the shift, whispered softly to Titan, fingers stroking his thick fur. "It's okay, it's almost over." Titan's tail twitched slightly in acknowledgement, muscles still coiled, body ready for action but restrained by trust in her. Across the street, the crowd held its collective breath. Every phone was recording, every camera lens focused on the standoff. It felt like the city itself had paused, waiting for the inevitable resolution. Parents clutched children, teachers whispered prayers, and officers prepared for the final confrontation. Suddenly the man made a movement, quick, desperate, reckless. He reached toward the bag at his side. Titan exploded into action. In an instant, the massive dog lunged forward, barking and growling, forcing the man to freeze mid-motion. Officers surged, surrounding him, drawing weapons and shouting commands. Emily's heart pounded, but she didn't move. Titan's protective instincts were unshakable, and she trusted him completely. She whispered again, quiet but steady, "I'm right here, Titan. We're okay." The reassurance wasn't just for him, it anchored her own courage. Titan's growl intensified, a living warning to anyone who might attempt harm. The man's hands trembled, sweat glistening on his forehead, as he realized the futility of his position. He was trapped, outmaneuvered by a bond forged in life-and-death circumstances, watched over by authorities who had finally arrived in force. Officers moved in quickly. Detectives from the original fire case approached cautiously, eyes narrowing as they took in the man's face. Recognition flickered. The fire, the vanished child, the missing years, it all converged in this single, tense moment. The man was apprehended without further incident, pushed to the ground as officers cuffed him. Titan stayed close to Emily, massive body shielding her, ears perked, growls subsiding only when he sensed no immediate threat remained. Emily's small hands remained on his leash, her tears finally spilling over in relief and gratitude. Ray's knelt beside her, voice trembling slightly as he spoke. "You're safe now, he can't touch you anymore." Emily buried her face in Titan's fur, sobs racking her small body. The dog's warm presence was a comfort, a living shield that had saved her once and now again. The crowd, still holding their collective breath, erupted into murmurs of disbelief and awe. Phones recorded every second. Live streams buzzed with frantic updates. and social media exploded with praise for the dog, the bravery of the child, and the dramatic conclusion to a story that had captivated an entire city. Detectives led the man away, reading his rights as officers secured the area. The unmarked car was impounded, its engine still warm, a silent testament to the failed plan of a desperate man. And in the center of it all, Emily stood, trembling, clutching Titan's leash, her protector, her hero, her constant. Reyes felt a lump in his throat as he watched the reunion between girl and dog. He had handled Titan for years, trained him, relied on him, but never had he seen the dog's loyalty expressed so fully, so viscerally, so undeniably. Titan had remembered. He had waited. And now, after years of separation, he had fulfilled his promise. Emily finally lifted her tear-streaked face, looking into Titan's deep, intelligent eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for never forgetting me." Titan nudged her hand gently, as if acknowledging her words, his tail flicking slightly in what could only be interpreted as approval. The city watched, transfixed. Parents whispered to their children, "That dog, he saved her twice." News anchors struggled to contain their awe on live feeds, describing the standoff, the bravery, the miraculous reunion. And yet, for Emily and Titan, the world had shrunk to a single truth. They were safe together, and nothing, not even a father consumed by obsession, could break the bond that had saved her life. But even as the man was led away, officers couldn't ignore one lingering question. How had Titan known exactly where to find her? Reyes realized the truth, the part of the story that no one outside of him and the dog would ever fully understand. Titan had waited instinctively, tirelessly. He had remembered the child he had saved. And when fate or coincidence brought her back into his proximity, he had acted without hesitation, driven by memory, loyalty, and a bond stronger than words. Emily, still clinging to Titan, felt the weight of the ordeal lift slightly, though her small hands trembled. She had survived fires, loss, fear, and now this confrontation. And through it all, she had not been alone. Titan had been there, Titan had protected her, Titan had remembered. And the city would never forget the moment a dog, a child, and a hero in uniform had defied fear, defied danger, and created a story that would resonate for years. But even in relief, one final suspense lingered. The past had been confronted, but the future, Emily's safety, her trust, and the lasting impact of the trauma, still hung in the balance. The chaos of the street slowly receded, replaced by an almost surreal calm. Officers had escorted the man away, the unmarked car towed, and the crowd kept a cautious distance, whispering in disbelief and awe. But for Emily, the ordeal was far from over. She still clung to Titan's thick leash, her small hands trembling, tears streaking her soot-smudged face. She felt the weight of years, the abandonment, the fear, the trauma, all pressing down, but Titan remained steadfast, his massive body a living wall against the world's uncertainties. Reyes knelt beside her, his voice soft but steady. "You're safe now, Emily. Nothing can hurt you here, not anymore." She nodded, her lips trembling as she traced Titan's ears, feeling the warmth of his body and the steady pulse of loyalty and strength. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe without panic. Yet the street still buzzed with tension. Phones continued to record, reporters whispered in hushed tones, and parents murmured in awe about the girl who had walked a police dog through danger itself. The story would go viral in minutes, but none of that mattered to Emily. All that mattered was Titan. He had been there before, and now, once again, he had protected her when she couldn't protect herself. Reyes helped guide Emily and Titan toward a quieter street, away from the cameras and prying eyes. The city continued its rhythm, but this small corner felt like a sanctuary. Emily glanced up at him, voice barely audible. Why did he never forget me?" Reyes swallowed hard, memories of the fire flooding back. "Because he's not just a dog, Emily. Titan, he remembers the ones he saves, he never forgets, and he never leaves them behind." She let out a shaky laugh, half in relief, half in disbelief, as she realized the depth of what had just happened. A dog, a hero, a friend, a guardian, had kept a promise she didn't even know existed. For a moment the world felt safe, but shadows of the past were not so easily dismissed. Detectives had begun piecing together Emily's history: the fire, the disappearance of her father, her placement in foster care, the years she spent moving from home to home. Every detail of her life had been meticulously recorded, assessed, and in some cases abandoned by the system. The trauma was real, the losses profound, and the journey to safety only beginning. Emily noticed a detective approaching, a folder in hand, his expression grave but empathetic. "Emily," he said gently, crouching to her level, "we need to ask you some questions about what happened and about your past, but you're safe. You have Titan and we'll make sure no one can harm you again." Emily nodded, her hands clutching Titan's leash tighter. She had survived the fire, survived abandonment, survived a father consumed by obsession, and now she would survive this as well. As the detective spoke, Titan remained vigilant. His eyes scanned every movement, every shadow, every figure nearby. Years of training, years of instinct, and years of loyalty had prepared him for this moment. Emily was safe because he remembered, because he never abandoned her, because he was more than a dog. He was her protector, her anchor, her unwavering companion. Reyes watched them both, heart tight. He had handled Titan through countless missions, dangerous criminals, and high-stakes rescues. He had never seen the dog respond with such precision, such understanding, such emotion. It was as if Titan understood the full weight of Emily's life, the losses, the fears, the trauma, and had taken it upon himself to shield her from every threat. Then Emily spoke, small but firm. I don't want to go back, not with him, not ever." Reyes nodded, understanding. The man had been removed, yes, but the emotional scars, the fear, the uncertainty, they lingered. "You won't have to," he said gently. "We'll make sure of that. You have Titan and we have the law on your side. Nothing will hurt you again." For a moment the city's chaos faded. Emily walked Titan down the sidewalk, each step measured, each step a reclamation of her power, her safety, her voice. People paused, watching the unlikely pair move through the urban landscape, a child and her guardian dog, a bond forged in fire and terror, now resilient and unbroken. But even as the relief settled, questions remained. How had Titan known where to find her after years? How had fate, or instinct, reunited them so dramatically? And what other dangers, lurking unseen, might emerge from the shadows of her past? The city watched, captivated, as Emily and Titan disappeared down the street, heroes in a story too extraordinary to fully comprehend. Ray stayed close, eyes scanning the surroundings, conscious that the world was unpredictable, that trauma left scars, and that vigilance could never entirely fade. Titan walked beside Emily, ears flicking, muscles taut, ready for anything. Emily felt the dog's presence like a shield, a promise, a constant heartbeat she could rely on. As they reached a small park away from the street, Emily allowed herself to finally sit, letting Titan curl protectively around her. She leaned against his warm, powerful body, resting her cheek on his fur. Tears flowed freely, not just from fear or trauma, but from relief, gratitude, and a profound sense of being understood. Titan rested his head on her shoulder, tail flicking slightly, as if acknowledging her release, her survival, her trust. Reyes watched quietly, knowing that some bonds transcended human understanding. Titan was not just a dog, he was a lifeline, a sentinel, a bridge between trauma and healing. And Emily, small and brave, had finally found someone she could rely on without fear. But even in the quiet of the park, shadows of the past lingered. Social workers, detectives, and officers began the process of untangling Emily's history, ensuring her safety, and preparing for what would come next. The city had witnessed the extraordinary reunion, the standoff, and the protection that only Titan could provide. Yet Emily's journey was far from over. And as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the park, Emily whispered softly into Titan's fur. "We made it, but I wonder, what else is out there?" Titan's ears flicked, tail stiffened slightly, eyes alert but calm. He had faced danger before and he would face it again. Whatever lay ahead, Emily and Titan would confront it together. Their bond, forged in smoke, fire, and fear, had proven unbreakable. And the city, though unaware of the full depth, had witnessed a story of courage, loyalty, and survival that would echo far beyond that quiet park. The suspense lingered. Emily had survived the immediate danger, but the shadows of her past, the threats unseen, and the questions of fate and instinct would not disappear so easily. What other secrets lay buried? What other challenges awaited the girl and her extraordinary protector? The answers would come, but only time would reveal them. The park was quiet now, a stark contrast to the chaos of the street. The city hummed in the distance, oblivious to the extraordinary story that had just unfolded: a little girl, a police dog, and a man whose obsession had nearly destroyed her. Emily sat on a worn wooden bench, Titan curled protectively around her, his massive head resting lightly against her shoulder. His warm, steady presence was a balm to the raw emotions that still shook her small body. Reyes crouched beside her, careful not to crowd the girl. "You're safe now, Emily," he said softly. "No one can touch you, not your father, not anyone." Emily nodded, lips trembling as tears streaked her soot-stained cheeks. She reached up, stroking Titan's thick fur, feeling the strength and reassurance in every movement. It's strange," she whispered, voice small but steady. "He was my dad, and yet I've never felt smaller than I did today, except when Titan was with me." Reyes smiled faintly, a lump in his throat. "He's more than a dog, Emily. Titan remembers, he protects, and he's never let you down." Emily leaned against Titan, letting herself relax for the first time in years. She felt safe, truly safe, in a way she hadn't imagined possible. Detectives and social workers approached cautiously, giving her space but ensuring she was secure. They carried folders, notes, and reassurances, their faces a mixture of professional concern and awe. The man had been arrested, charged with harassment and obstruction, and would face legal consequences for the years of obsession and danger he had caused. Yet the emotional scars he left behind were immeasurable. Emily's foster caseworker knelt beside her, offering a gentle smile. "Emily, you're going to be placed in a safe, permanent home soon," she said. "Somewhere you won't have to move again, somewhere Titan can stay with you." Emily's eyes widened. Titan had been her lifeline through smoke, fire, and fear, but she hadn't realized she could keep him. "Really?" she whispered, voice trembling. Titan's ears twitched, his eyes meeting hers with understanding, as if saying, "I've always been here and I'll always stay." She buried her face in his fur, tears of relief mingling with tears of gratitude. Reyes watched silently, heart heavy with emotion. He had trained Titan for years, but nothing had prepared him for the bond between dog and child. He had seen courage, yes, countless times, but never had he witnessed such unwavering loyalty, such instinctive protection, such a quiet understanding that transcended words. Titan had remembered Emily. Titan had protected her. And now, years later, he had fulfilled a promise that only he could understand. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the park, Emily finally lifted her tear-streaked face. I'm not scared anymore," she whispered. "Not with you here, Titan." Titan's tail flicked slightly, a silent affirmation. He had waited, he had remembered, and he would never leave her side. Reyes glanced at the approaching detectives. "We're going to make sure your father can't hurt you again," he said. "Everything that happened, it's being documented. You'll be protected. And Titan will be there too." Emily nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She had survived fires, abandonment, threats, and fear. And now, with Titan beside her, she felt ready for the future. The social worker handed her a small notebook. "Emily, this is for you. You can write about what happened, draw, or just keep it as your memory, whatever you want." Emily took it with both hands, opening the first page. She wrote a single word carefully and deliberately: safe. She smiled through tears, glancing at Titan, who nudged her hand gently with his nose. Reyes felt a lump in his throat as he watched her, realizing that this was more than a rescue. It was a reclamation, a child reclaiming her courage, her voice, her life, with a dog who had waited patiently through years of separation to ensure she could do so. The city, distant and unaware, continued its rhythm, but here in this small park, a story of extraordinary loyalty, courage, and trust had reached its emotional peak. Emily stood, still clutching Titan's leash, feeling the strength of his presence beneath her hand. She looked around, seeing the officers, detectives, and social workers, and finally a small smile appeared on her face. She felt like herself again, small but brave, frightened but resilient, alone no longer. "Thank you, Titan," she whispered, pressing her forehead against his massive head. Titan let out a soft, comforting whine, tail flicking gently. He had been there when the flames consumed everything she knew. He had been there when fear threatened to swallow her. And now he was here, steady and unyielding, a constant guardian in a world that had often felt too big, too dangerous, too unkind. Ray stepped back, giving her space. "You're ready," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Ready to face whatever comes next with Titan by your side." Emily nodded, walking slowly, Titan at her side. The dog's massive form moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the surroundings, ever vigilant, ever loyal, yet gentle in his presence. The detectives and social workers exchanged quiet words, planning the next steps: permanent placement, therapy, ongoing protection. But Emily barely heard them. All she knew was Titan, the warmth of his fur, the unwavering protection he offered, and the knowledge that she was finally, truly safe. As they reached the park's edge, Emily paused, looking back at the street where chaos had briefly ruled. She whispered almost to herself, "We made it and we'll be okay." Titan nudged her hand, tail flicking in silent agreement. The bond forged in fire, in fear, and trauma had survived. It had endured, and it would continue, stronger than ever. Reyes felt the weight of the moment settle. He had seen courage in the line of duty before, but never like this. Emily's bravery, Titan's loyalty, the way they had faced danger together, it was extraordinary. The city had witnessed a miracle, though most would never understand the full depth of what had happened. And as the sun finally dipped behind the skyline, casting long shadows across the park, Emily and Titan walked together, side by side. She felt his warmth, his strength, and his unwavering loyalty. And for the first time in years, she knew, without a shadow of doubt, that she was safe. Forever. The city might never know the full story of Titan and Emily, but the little girl who had once been trapped in fire, fear, and abandonment had found her protector, her friend, her guardian. And Titan, the police dog who had never forgotten, would never leave her side. The story of courage, loyalty, and survival had reached its cinematic climax, but its impact would echo forever, in Emily's heart, Titan's eyes, and the city that had briefly witnessed a miracle unfold. The suspense had lifted, but the bond would endure, unbroken and eternal.